Audience, we have full attendance here today. Anyways, Councillor Gower and Councillor Wood are both online. Anyways, and so they're in the house, so to speak. First up, we have our consent agenda for the minutes of the council meeting held September 4th, 2024, and approval of the council meeting agenda. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendations as noted? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Grens. Any errors, omissions, or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you. We have one delegation today. We have a delegation from the Oceanside Non-Market Housing Task Force regarding the regional non-market housing needs. We have a representation by Mr. Scott Harrison and Ms. J. Vinette, thank you. We're going to be discussing about on the demand for non-market housing in the region. So welcome to City of Parksville. Nice to see you.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Good afternoon. Thank you very much to Mayor and Council for receiving our delegation today. My name is Jane Vinette, and I am the coordinator of the Oceanside Community Health and Wellness Network, and I am also the facilitator of the Oceanside Non-Market Housing Task Force. We are a grassroots community-based table that came together recognizing that there is a need for more affordable housing in the community and in the region and Oceanside in general. And one of the things that we are doing is strongly advocating to all areas of Oceanside to build more affordable housing, allowing youth, families, seniors, and workers especially to have the opportunity to live, work, and age in the region of Parksville. And today, one of our volunteer task members, we are all volunteers at this table. We are not appointed or official in any capacity. But we have Scott Harrison here in volunteer capacity to talk about, he's put together a great presentation on data expressing need of more affordable housing in the community. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Just a couple of quick things. Firstly, we're really grateful to be on the traditional territory, Coast Salish people. Thank you very much to your staff. I gave this slideshow at 9 in the morning. 4 hours later, it's good to go. Everything is really smooth and professional. You have great staff. And yeah, just thanks for everyone involved in the task force who I think I should give a shout out to Susanna Newton in particular. This is sort of like her idea going back 5 or 6 years. And it's only in the last year it's really come together. So this slide, some of them I'm just going to skip through. The slide deck has been given to your staff, so you can look at it at home when you have time. I think some of the points are sort of self-evident, but it's just the hard data from the census to confirm what you probably already know from living in this community for a while. This is the total population in Parksville since 1986. You can sort of see how you're starting to get a larger and larger number of folks who are a little bit older. So if you look at the bottom where it has a total count, you've got a roughly 5 times increase in folks over 75 and roughly quadrupling, not quite quadrupling, of folks 60 to 75. Gualalcan Beach, the ratios are even a little bit stronger. It's about the same story though at the end of the day. And then this is something where you look at the share of the population in 15-year bands. And it's just sort of helpful to see how the population in your community is shifting over time. And this is Gualalcan Beach. And the one I found interesting when I first did this was this, Area F. So Area F, 20 years ago, I have a lot of family in the area. You move out to the rural areas, start off there, and then move into eventually Parksville or Gualalcan Beach. It's really changing quite rapidly where it's becoming very much more for seniors as well. Area G, and that's Bowser. Okay, and this is the total population for the area if you're ever curious, and you can see where the growth is happening and where things are kind of actually stable over the last 20 years. So for young kids, for example, we actually had more 20 years ago than we do today, even with all the growth that's happening. Median age, Parksville has increased the most since 2001, but it increased the least in the last 5 years. So just something I found very interesting. Growth rates. This is where environmentalists should be talking about Bowser and the Noose Bay. So when people give Parksville a hard time for how much you're growing, you are the 3rd fastest growing community in Oceanside. You're not the 1st. 3 of the 4 electoral areas are actually growing faster than the provincial average. and the type of development in those areas also is something people should be talking about. This is just for reference. Similar trends in all our communities. Growth rates are generally above average. And yeah, anyone wants a slide deck in the community too, send me an email through my council account. Just to be clear, I am here as a citizen, not as Councillor Harrison, but you have my public email, so please use it if you want the slides. So the need for affordable housing, which is really the meat of what we're trying to do here. There's a few caveats. The data I'm using is from actually on September 20th, the province updated their website on housing needs assessments. They have a default tool for housing needs with the 20-year projections for population overall and core housing need. It's using the same source. It's called the Housing Assessment Resource Tools, HART, from UBC, weirdly enough through the Allard School of Law. But that's the default resource. If your community wanted to have your own consultant look at 20-year housing need, you can do that, but they do have guidelines. But this is sort of the default information. The other caveat I'd have is it is income-based. There's no way to really measure someone's assets. So in Parksville and the surrounding region, you will have seniors who have very little income, widow on her own, but she might have the home free and clear. So there are people who might be income poor, but equity rich. So this is the projection for affordable housing deficit in Parksville from that website. And so 600 households overall. It sort of breaks down one-person household, two-person household in sort of the maximum shelter costs they can afford. Obviously, forgive me, in our area, nobody is offering a rental for $831. Forgive me. I looked online in Craigslist this morning. It's about $1,500 to $1,700 for a one-bedroom. Even a bachelor was $1,500. This is the breakdown in the demographics. The highlights are done by a trackpad, so they're not quite straight. Sorry about that. But you can see single moms are kind of obviously, that's a core need. Also, older seniors who are on their own. There are a lot of folks who are sort of struggling with the cost of housing. This is your total growth, by the way. So the total number of households you're going to gain by, I think it's a 20-year build out, or is it just 10? Anyways, it's a lot of people. And then this is the deficit in Qualicum Beach, 230. So it's not just Parksville that has a deficit. It's every community in the region. This is our build out. We have to build a lot more. Same story, single moms. And then just going through the rural areas, Nanoose, 70 folks need some help. Area F, 375 households. That's a fair number. G is 150. H is 95. Total it all up, 1,500. Again, this is probably your upper band because it's strictly income based. But even if you reduced it in half, it's still 750 plus. And that's 750 units, not people. So that's going to be a lot of affordable housing in the region. There isn't any government that's giving you enough money to build this much. So yeah, just what I said before. Other thing too to bear in mind, median household net worth is 335. So if you didn't use that site, and you just use that 30% of your income on your housing costs, the left number, when you see those, all the communities, the left number is homeowners. So what percentage of homeowners are spending too much money on their housing costs? So for Qualicum Beach, it's 12.4%. That's below the provincial average of almost 20. But renters, we are one of the worst regions in BC. Qualicum Beach is worse than Parksville. And last time, I know the BC Nonprofit Housing Association looked at the whole province. Qualicum Beach was the third worst community in all of BC, behind Creston and West Vancouver. Creston, of all places, was the worst. But even then, if you use that 30% metric, you have well over 4,000 homes. So the 1,500 households is probably not that extreme, but it's hopefully this is just a little bit sobering. This is a lot of households. So currently planned and existing supply. The existing supply, I'm using the subsidized household rentals. There are probably some co-ops that are missing. There's a co-op trailer park in Qualicum Beach, for example, but it's still, right now you have to spend about 500,000 to get in. That's not too affordable for a lot of folks, but it's a heck of a lot better than single family home. And I'm not trying to speak to the Lions project here. It's just the one thing I know has been discussed in Parksville. So if there was something to go ahead, that would be the one project I'm familiar with. So end of the day, there's way more need than you actually have units. Currently, planned projects aren't enough, but no community is probably building enough. And then one thing I would highlight too, healthcare funding is going to be so fraught over the next decade as baby boomers start to essentially reach the end of their lives. That means that the budgetary pressure on the provincial government It's already 40% plus of operating for the provincial budget for healthcare. That number is going to go up significantly over the next decade or so. And affordable housing funding may be squeezed out. May. I don't know for sure, but maybe. So what you could try to do over the next few years, if you have a land inventory, maybe designate some of those, not all, but some of those properties for a future affordable housing development. Look at your development processes. Honestly, Parksville, you guys are really good at this. This is where I think your staff do an excellent job. All the feedback I've heard from both market and non-market builders are that Parksville is a joy to work with. You guys are very fast, very attentive. Your staff deserves a round of applause, honestly. And then proactively seek out partners. This would be looking for nonprofits. So maybe there are some you probably already are familiar with, like BYLAWS and Lions and other groups. But just make sure you're liaising with them to see what are your needs, how can we help you do something in Parksville. Market housing, this is just briefly to let people know when people say, well, why do we need to build affordable housing? Can't we just rely on the market? This is 2001 in Oceanside. People usually undervalue their home a bit, so you can add a little bit for what you would probably get if you sold your house. And this is the ratio today. And you can see if the housing costs have basically tripled and income has maybe doubled. Also, the ratio doesn't give you the full story. As you make more money, you pay more tax, right? You pay a higher percent of your income tax. So your take home as a proportion decreases. All right. Rental costs. This was done in May when I looked through the whole region on Craigslist and double checked everything. I'm highlighting the rural areas because that's where you're supposed to find the cheaper units. Not so much. It's pretty much the same. When I looked up Parksville this morning, there was one bachelor suite for $1,500 a month. This is Canada compared to all the other G7 countries. We're kind of bonkers. On the right-hand side is our regional real estate board data. Oh, I'm almost out of time. Okay. Mortgage qualifications. The real thing here is that only about, for a condo, only about 1 in 7 households, 1 in 6 can afford the mortgage. And for homes, it's like 1 in 12. There's a bunch of other data. This is how much it costs to build around here. Last thing too, I'll probably stop here and the rest of this slide you can go over another time. This is City of Vancouver and the change in where their number of young families, the number of children is what they're actually tracking. A guy named Jens von Bergman, he worked with the province. You can see the areas like UBC and downtown, even though it's really, really dense. Like I went to UBC for my undergrad. It looks very different now. There are condos everywhere, but that's actually where the young families are. And if you look just to the east in like Shaughnessy and Kerrisdale, that's where the families aren't. Anyways, there's a bunch more slides, blah, blah, blah. This goes over some of the programs. My apologies. The one thing too is when you're looking at affordable housing, there are a couple different funding streams. This is something where it's a bit of an active conversation. I don't know what the reality is for folks who are trying to build a project. This is what's on the website for BC Housing for the household income limits. And I apologize for going over by a minute, but I just highlighted Parksville Qualicum because you can see that for a 2 or 3 bedroom, if you're a couple, it's really hard to avoid getting over 70,000. That's basically 2 people working minimum wage with less than 40 hours a week. And Rental Protection Fund, kudos for getting the Molliet Manor done. That's a fantastic project. Great job, Parcel. And then, yeah, some other things too. And that's it. Okay. Sorry, I went over. My apologies. Thank you very much for your indulgence, your worship, Mayor and Council.
We give you a little extra time because we know you.
Thank you.
And I recognize the fact that you were speaking incredibly fast.
Yeah, I do apologize for that.
I was quite surprised with the amount of data that you actually presented.
Oh, yeah.
There's no one like you, Scott.
And I know it's sort of character. And just for folks, if you're curious, like here are the actual sources. So you can go through it all and find all the scholarly papers and census data and everything. So It's all there.
And as much as I like our new monitors, it still was difficult to see. So I'll just confirm that we do have that slide deck anyways, is in our council package. Thanks, Scott. Very good. I'm going to open the floor to questions. Councillor Martin.
I actually don't have any questions. I think you did a great job for us, though. It's good for, I mean, that's a lot of data to really take in what, 10 minutes? Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate
No
that.
problem.
And it's food for thought. I mean, it gives us some really good guidelines. So thank you.
I would just suggest too, the key takeaway also should be that it shouldn't rest on one community. So it's not Parksville's responsibility to fix these broader problems. It's every community's responsibility. Regional district, my community as well, Qualicum Beach. We all got to work together on this because it's too big for any one community to fix on its own. We can't do a sort of one and done approach where we've got one project and let's pat ourselves in the back and mission accomplished and hang the banner. We're nowhere close to that. So hopefully every community realizes that we can't just point to someone else and say, oh, they'll take care of it for us. Sorry, that's been a bit of a conversation in Qualicum Beach in the past. I just want to highlight, hopefully we don't have that conversation moving forward.
Go ahead, Councilor Grins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our delegation. Just let you catch your breath there for a second before I ask my question. So clearly a lot of data there. Maybe one data point that I didn't see is BC Assessment when they presented to council indicated that Parksville's non-market change, which means new build, increased 2% over last BC Assessment, which is actually twice the provincial average. So in terms of new inventory coming on the market, Parksville is definitely punching above our weight if the goal is to build more housing. In terms of the presentation, what is, in your opinion, the role of municipal government when it comes to providing non-market housing, bearing in mind that the tax base is drawn primarily from other property owners?
And this is a very live conversation in affordable housing policy wonk circles. Who pays ultimately at the end of the day? So one of the big things, for example, in Metro Vancouver is how do you do your DCCs? So if we're building more density, should more of your DCCs be weighted towards people who are building new stock, or should it be more for the community as a whole? It's a very live conversation. For a community of our size, when I had a meeting with, oh gosh, I think it was BC housing staff at this UBCM, the analogy I used was we set the table. We don't do the heavy lifting. We don't do the heavy investment. We don't have the money for that unless you feel you have an explicit mandate from the public where you said, we are going to build 5 affordable housing projects in the next 4 years. I promise you that no matter what it costs, we will get it done. And you get elected on that. Then you can raise taxes significantly because that'd be things like acquiring land, doing some of the pre-zoning work, helping nonprofits with some of the permits potentially they might need. I would suggest for Parksville, like you guys do have some projects that have been approved. The housing behind the new QF with BYLAWS, the rental protection fund being transferred over to BYLAWS as well. And there was a smaller seniors building that was originally approved, I think in 2018. I forget the address, my apologies. So to the point, like you are doing some things very effective. And I think the thing that you've done very well is how well any project gets processed. Including non-market, that makes it much more attractive than a community where you might make last second changes. No community is being mentioned when I say that. So my recommendation for Parksville is in terms of your process is really good. The only thing would be maybe talking to the people, do you want us to acquire land for affordable housing? It will accelerate the rate at which we build, but it comes at a very expensive cost. Do you want us to do that or not? But I wouldn't suggest a significant deviation because I think you guys are making progress as it is. It's just more the rest of the region needs to catch up.
Follow up.
Thank you. I may just make a follow-up comment is that I guess more props to the Parksville staff on all this, working very well with partners to deliver non-market housing. Recently, the housing minister, and now technically former housing minister, as we're in election, was in town, and the mayor and I had a chance to chat with him. And I think hopefully the message got through to him that we said Parksville is punching above our weight in terms of making housing possible, including market and non-market housing. What we need is the province to come in and support us with, I said, a big carrot to make sure that we have the supporting things we need in the community to facilitate the continued housing development. We have a wish list for that. And so that's where I think the province has a role to play in making sure that we can deliver what their goal is, which is to increase the housing stock.
If I may, through the chair, larger communities have sometimes signed MOUs. I've never heard of that happening with a smaller community, but it might be worth checking. If that's something, again, after the election, because nothing's going to happen for the next few weeks. If you propose a brilliant new idea, it might not go anywhere. But after the election, if there's a similar incentive for non-market housing from the government, whoever that may be, checking to see if you could do maybe an MOU. And then there's funds which are set aside. So Nanaimo signed an MOU with BC Housing, and then they basically they know they have a pool of funds that's been set aside for Nanaimo. And that's all going to spend all at once over time, but you know the money is there. So that might be something that might be beneficial to the city of Parksville.
Did you have that? Yeah. Oh, Councillor Gore, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I do want to start off by recognizing that today we marked 1 year since there was a terrorist attack on the state of Israel. And as we approach Thanksgiving, I personally am a very grateful and thankful Canadian to be living in a peaceful part of the world. As we see the repercussions of that war ongoing with civilians on either side getting affected. So my thoughts and prayers to all the people of the region. Thank you, Councillor Harrison, for the presentation. My question to you is the role of regional districts. And we see the zoning in the regional districts is typically not to have the densities that we need for affordable housing projects. So how can the regional districts come on board and help take off the pressure that typically I think cities like Parksville and Qualicum Beach would end up having those people move to our areas where we are building those affordable housing projects. So what do you think the regional districts can do to help us out?
Thank you very much, just through the chair. So that's an excellent question. I would suggest sometime, if you have spare time, which you may not, as you have many hats, Councillor Gar, but the Capital Regional District has a very active approach to housing as a regional district. And again, the Capital Regional District and Regional District in Nanaimo are very different in many ways. So it's not going to be like a one-to-one analogy, but they actually have funds set aside as a regional district to buy land for housing. They're investing in it. It's a very different approach from the Regional District in Nanaimo, where it's a little bit more hands-off. I have talked to Regional District of Nanaimo staff in the past. They did indicate that there's not a lot of serviced land in the rural areas, and the proximity to services is a real impediment. It's hard to get sufficient scale to get funded, and then you have to rely on wells and septic. So there's sort of like a hard cap for how much density you can do if you're relying on just wells and septic. And then you're not building enough units to get funded, so it's a catch-22. But I would suggest definitely at the RDN, there could be some conversation of, I understand it's a time of horrible tax increases for the RDN. I totally get that. But is there planning capacity set aside for looking at housing in the long term? Is it going to be more of a perfunctory, this is how much we're growing, and I guess we're just going to grow? Or are you going to have that conversation of how are we growing? Where are we growing? And the last little caveat I'd have is that if you drive out into like Arrington or Coombs and go down one of the side roads and look how long those roads go with single family homes on them, and you can drive for a good 5-10 minutes and it's just single family home, single family home, single family home. And is that the development we really want in the long run? Because it takes up way more water. It's way more expensive. It's hard to do public transportation. It's not really rural at that point. It's more sort of a very suburban suburb. So that's sort of like the RDN level question. I do think it's a huge component though to our regional housing demands. So I don't sit at the RDN table, so I think that's the mayor and Councillor Wood. But I would suggest having those conversations of what are we doing as a regional district to deal with a very difficult structural problem.
Councillor Gore, your image has disappeared. I was going to ask if you wanted a follow-up, but I can't see you. So if you could, any follow-up required, Councillor Gore, if you're still listening? I would say he went offline perhaps. Yeah. And thank you for that, Scott. It has been a very big issue at the RDN level. You nailed it right away when you said about lack of services. I like the affordability of land. That's what they have going in the rural districts anyways, and that makes it certainly more attractive, but without those lack of services. So basically you're looking at areas of the RDN that actually have services in play that's going to make this a viable option. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to the delegation. Thank you for your presentation, Scott. As you did mention, I think you acknowledged that you do speak fairly quickly, and there was also a lot of information flipping by there. So I do have a couple of questions. A couple of things that stood out for me. One was that in the Parksville area that there are, I guess, 47.7% of renters are spending more than 30% of their income. So I think that's quite alarming, frankly. And so these are existing people, obviously, and also the Parksville deficit. So from the data you collected, there was a deficit of, was it 600 units that would be needed for Parksville or 1,000? I just wasn't clear on that. I wonder if you could refresh that for me.
Sure. No, 600 was the right number
Okay.
for folks who are identified by that tool. You might find, though, I'm not sure, like I don't want to presuppose what you want to do as a council. You might want to get a third party to do your housing needs assessment. You might have a different number, but that might be a rough ballpark. Their model is relatively sophisticated. If you want to go online, you can click on their website. I gave a link in the sources where you can click on their website, go to their website, look at the methodology they use. And then in terms of the percent of renters, Qualicum Beach is about 13% worse than the provincial average. I think it's hovering around 40%, a little bit under 40, I think, about 38, 39. So with Parksville at around 47 to 48%, you are noticeably worse than the provincial average on that metric, but you are better than average for homeowners because you have a lot of homeowners who don't have mortgages. So our region is very much one where homeowners do better than average. There is about 1/3 lower seniors who are struggling financially than the provincial average. But renters, particularly younger people, young families, single parents in particular, are really having a difficult time.
Follow up?
Go ahead, Councilor Bill.
And thank you. And when you refer to the need for, I take that for right now, to address things right now, Parksville would need an additional 600 units that would be at the non-market level, at the affordable level. And I take that also to mean, just correct me if I'm wrong, not necessarily the standard that's used for affordability as in 30% of the mean or median income. Can you clarify that for people?
That's an excellent question. I'll try the best I can because I'm just getting the data from a secondary source. I'm trusting that they're actually not just getting people who are a couple percentage points away. Like if you're spending 31% of your income on your rent, you wouldn't want to build a new unit for that person. You'd want to give them a tiny little top up on their income if you had say a provincial mandate to eliminate all renters spending more than 30%. I would have a hunch, though, that whatever the number is, even if it's half that, if it's a 300 deficit, that's more than you're going to build in the next 2 or 3 years. Almost certainly, forgive me, I could be way off, but I feel pretty confident given how few projects get funded. You might get 2 or 3 in the next couple of years. And you guys, if I was BC Housing, I'd rather work with you than most other communities in the Mid-Island. Maybe Nanaimo is different, but certainly for smaller communities in our area. Because the way your staff handles applications is a pretty smooth process. The question would just be where the location of the land and the site-specific concerns. But yeah, as far as the total demand, I just point to the data that's on that website, and I wouldn't say that I would vouch for it no matter what, but it's a big number no matter what it is.
Again, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to clarify as well, from everything that I understand, and I have been attending these meetings as well, but I'm a slow study, so I need extra time. But the big difference, the big need, I take it, in order to provide housing that is below market so that people are not spending more than, a ridiculous amount of money on rent, is that the way cities and municipalities can help is with land, that the land cost is such that private builders just cannot provide it. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So If you look at, there was a slide sort of went on private sector development, and I know pretty precisely 2 projects in our region, one in Qualicum Beach, one further north. And the average is about $400 a square foot. There's also some local builders who say it's about $450 a square foot. Your soft costs are going to be about, on a good project, 10 to 15%. If the province throws a bunch of things at you, it could rise, but let's assume it's a smooth process. So now you have $460 a square foot, probably ballpark. 20% for your financing for ownership. It's higher for rental. I don't know the exact number for rental, but another 1/5, you're getting close to $600 a square foot. That's with free land. So 1,000 square feet, $600,000, right? And then land costs on top of that. Good luck getting that on the private market, with the greatest respect. And if you try to do below that, the banks won't lend you money. If you're in the private sector, you have to get money from a bank as a loan, and then you essentially pay it back. Most people don't use their own money for every dollar in a development. It's just, if it goes south, you've lost everything. So you're borrowing from a bank, and the bank will set that minimum profit margin. If you do better, God bless, it's a capitalist society, but it's really hard to go below that 18 to 20%, because that, I think, is the minimum threshold banks will lend out money at.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Comments? Seeing none. Thanks, Scott. Just a couple points I want to make from City Parksville perspective is we have from very good advice from our very efficient planning department, as you've described. They have described to us what is a good form of balanced housing for the city of Parksville. It's a balanced housing needs, and that's what our staff is very good at advising council. You can't have all affordable. You can't have all market. You need that balance, because one obviously pays for the other one, that void. So we have that going on for us because they're very efficient at what they do. And that's why we have them. That's kind of one of our little secrets. We don't want to let that out, why we're so busy with the small amount of development that's going in Parksville, as you know. But the biggest problem that always comes in the way is land value. And land value. So the city of Parksville is getting rather short now on land value because we have contributed a number of pieces of land in the past, I would say in the last decade, anyways, to fit that affordable housing criteria. We have a proposal, as you know, that's coming up anyways, for council approval anyways, by the Lions Housing anyways. That's on us on Parksville land as well. Phase 2 of the BYLAWS housing behind Moliette is also coming up for council approval also. So we have quite a bit more coming up, as well as the existing affordable and below market rentals that we already have in town, which has been already fulfilled anyways by a number of groups, as in BYLAWS housing, as in Lions housing projects that has recently come to mind. And we're pretty healthy with what we've done so far, and we have more to do. We absolutely, but we also recognize the fact that the reason the market rents are so high in this area is due to supply and demand. And so that's why we also are including the market rental market anyways. We're attracting those developers anyways to create that here. We're changing it a little bit. We're encouraging more families, and we're going into the densification of plexus, as we like to call it, and that's the densification for townhouses and so forth. And Qualicum Beach has actually done a pretty good job. I was just there yesterday, anyways, checking of your townhouses development that I'm very impressed with. So we want to continue to strive for that, and that will bring the market down, supply and demand for those rentals, get those costs down as well. So that's our plan. We do have a plan in place, and I thank you for this. And we recognize that we always need more, but at the same time, it has to be, well, based on land inventory, we're getting a little short, as I can tell you right now from City Park. So I know what we own and what we have left. So. But anyways, yeah, we're continuing to strive to those. We're doing well, as Councillor Grants mentioned. We're punching way beyond our weight, and we'll continue to do so with the amount of projects that a lot of people haven't even seen yet. More to come. Thank you very much, Scott. Yeah, that's great. Council, thank you very much. Okay. Under reports, we have the first report is regarding the Grant and Aid Select Committee, the fall 2024 Grant and Aid applications. I'm going to read this one out in full so we know what's happening here. We have, do I have a mover or seconder for the recommendation? that the report from the Grant and Aid Select Committee dated September 23rd, 2024, entitled Fall 2024 Grant and Aid Applications be received. And number two, that $2,500 be allocated from the 2024 Grant and Aid budget for applications received for the period ended August 30th, 2024. And I'm going to ask the grant committee for this time if they could read out the amounts that they have approved this time. Sorry, it was, I believe, Council Beal and Councillor Grant, was it not? Councillor Gore. Oh, yes, that's right. Okay. So if do you have that information, Councillor Beal? Can you do that? If not, I can read it. I just thought you've done all the lifting on it, so you should
I
get some
do have
credit.
it here, but I figured I moved it. I didn't hear a seconder. That was all.
I was just
We
bringing
don't
this,
need to, okay,
just
read it
bringing
out.
this out to reading for the information, and then I'll ask for a mover and seconder.
Okay. That $2,500 be allocated from the 2024 Grants and Aid budget for applications received for the period ending August 30th, 2024 as follows. Friends of Foster Park to receive $500. Island Rescue Veterinary Society Fantastic Beasts, that request was declined. Mount Arrowsmith Pipe Band, $500. Oceanside Minor Hockey Association, $500. Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce, that the recommendation is to decline that request. Parksville and District Historical Society, $500. Parksville Community Garden Society, $500. Ravensong Aquatic Club, that request, the recommendation was to decline, and that comes to a total of $2,500.
Thank you very much for your efforts on this. Could I have a mover and seconder for the recommendations, please? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Martin. Any discussion? Seeing those, all those in favor? Thank you. That carries. The next report on the agenda is from for the Director of Community Planning and Building Follow-up Report, Zoning and Development Bylaw Amendment, application at 156 Ford Avenue and 151 Hickey Avenue. For further consideration of a zoning and development bylaw amendment. Any comments from planning? None at this time. Thank you. Everyone has on the background information. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations as noted? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any discussion? Councillor Gore, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through you, I have a question to staff. Since this will be subdivided into 2 lots, and with the Bill 44 coming, each lot will be allowed up to 3 units. So we are looking at a total of 6 units. And if the current zoning is in place with RS1, I guess the individual can have up to 4 units. What I'm thinking is perhaps in the future, we'll see these zoning changes. Let's say other properties follow suit and we have SLR zones and we have this increased density of up to 6 units, hypothetically. I know not everybody might go that route. Are we able to service this density in the future, considering these are very narrow streets and most of the parking might end up on the streets? Can our fire trucks get through, and would there be a need for sidewalks? Like, should we be looking at perhaps some amenities contributions for the future? Like, are we ready for this kind of density in this neighborhood is my question.
And through our Director of Planning, Mr. Blaine Russell, if you could answer that, please.
Certainly, if I may, to Councillor Gore. So a couple points of clarification. So the bill is already in effect. The zoning, the maximum is 4 units, not 6. And so the current zoning in place would allow for 4 dwellings already. And the change in zone does the change in zoning through the subdivision technically would allow for up to 8 units. However, they would to facilitate that with the existing structures, I think would be pretty challenging. Again, you would have to, you know, I mean, putting a suite in one of them, sure, but to actually try to convert the existing house or what was the carriage house into a fourplex, I think would be challenging without substantially changing the building. As for the entire neighborhood, this isn't an application for the entire neighborhood. It's an application for one property, which is why at this point in time, we're not proposing to pre-zone the entire neighborhood for higher density. But at this point in time, the engineering department has not flagged a concern with providing services to this particular site. With respect to amenities, I think the question becomes, in some ways, this is somewhat of the specific proposal is somewhat of a lateral change in use. It's simply to split the title on the property. So the carrying capacity for for a small proposal like this to put sidewalks the whole length of the street or something probably just isn't there. The person would likely just withdraw their application and look at a different approach. So hopefully I've answered your question, but as I said, this is just one application on one property. On a per application basis, the city always does an assessment. And when the engineering department says, nope, the services aren't sufficient on that street, then we would be recommending not to go ahead, but that isn't the case here.
Satisfied, Councillor Gordon?
Yes, thank you. No, Mr. Russell, I do understand it's the application for one property, not the entire street. I'm saying it does set a precedent. So at what time, I'm just saying as a city, should we have a vision and see how perhaps in the future could put us in a precarious situation, if it would, in your opinion? But thank you for the answer. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? All those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Next report on the agenda is consideration of proceeding with notice for a development variance permit at 446 Harnish Avenue. To consider proceeding with notice for a development variance permit. Do I have a mover and seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Beal, seconded by Councillor Gore. Any discussion? All those in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you. The next report on the agenda is by the Manager of Engineering regarding the 2024 Pavement Overlay Program Award of Construction Contract to award the contract for pavement overlay on the Alberni Highway, Stanhope Road and Temple Street and pavement patching in various locations. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wood. I'm just going to comment in the discussion period here. My background information. So just for the public anyways, to recognize the what we're doing here, this is for the Pavement Overlay Program Award for the following year. Anyways, and so the total award is $1.1 million. But just wanted to point out that this overlay project has been allocated $890,000 of that amount is from the Growing Community Fund for those works, just to let you know that it has been built into the budget, and that's one of the reasons that we're going ahead with it, because we have that allocation from the Growing Community Fund. So to let you know that it's not just paving for the sake of paving. The conditions have been recommended that these locations are in need of it by the paving assessment, and so that's why we're going ahead with it at this time. So it just lets you know. Go ahead, Councillor Frass.
Just a question of staff and for this pavement to be repaired, is this coming from that ride van pavement assessment program that we had got done? That's where these ones were identified?
Go ahead, CAO Kaler or Ayla, whoever is online. Okay.
Thank you. Through the mayor. Yes, exactly. So that presentation from the consultant had a list of different priorities, and if you recall, like some red, yellow, and green kind of street conditions. And so staff used that to come up with the recommendations for these priority paving projects.
Yeah, no, that answers my question. I just didn't see it in the background information here of how it was prioritized, and I figured it would have been linked through that ride van. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I had two questions, but the first one was precisely the same question that Councillor Frass asked, so thank you. My second question is, do we have any sort of a timeline for these projects at this point in time, or is that too soon? And when could we have that information?
CAO Kaler or Ayla, Mr. Fuller? Yes, Ayla, if I could just request the comment is if you have a timeline, like obviously there's one that was considerably larger than the other on Alberni Highway and so forth. Do you have an idea, rough and dirty, or are we subject to supplier as well?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In answer, we are waiting to award the project to get their construction schedule finalized. They need the award to get their construction schedule finalized, and a part of that will also be the weather. So with paving, we are a little bit weather dependent, and at a certain point in the year, the asphalt plant will close. It's usually quite a bit later in the year, and we do have a bit of good weather on the way, I think, in the forecast, probably jinxed it now. So in answer to your question, the schedule is still up in the air. The work will probably be underway, like once it starts, it'll be usually pretty quick. And I don't know which projects they will want to start with first. That will be probably up to the contractor.
Thank you, Ayla. Good, Mary. Good. Thank you very much. Any other further questions at this time? Councillor Gore.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A quick question to staff. So it's in the notes that only one was successful bidder for this project. Why was that? Have you never worked with anybody other than Haylock previously?
Would you like me to answer that, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Ayla.
Thank you. I can just answer, we did a public procurement method. So we put it out for a public bid, and we had it out for a number of weeks, and we received one bid from the one paving company that exists. From as far as I can tell, there's kind of some local companies that are all the same company essentially. So we got one bid from the company that's local here that we worked with quite a bit.
Thank you. Any other questions, council, or discussion? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. We have the final adoption under the bylaws for the permissive taxation exemption bylaw 2024 number 1593 for the 2025 permissive tax exemptions. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Grenz, seconded by Councillor Wood. Any errors or omissions or a discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. We have bylaws for final adoption, the zoning and development amendment bylaw 2024, number 2000.149 for the max and text amendment to RC1 at 365 Monliette Street South. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Beal. Any errors or discussion at this time? All those in favor? Carries unanimous. Thank you. Council, at this time, are there any notices of motion you want to put on the table for the next meeting? Seeing none. Thank you. We'll move on now to liaison reports. We have moved to liaison reports. In the interest of efficiency, I would ask the council members keep their updates concise And we'll move right to, I see Councillor Wood here regarding the RDN Oceanside Services Committee. Is that correct, Councillor Wood? Do you have something there?
That's correct, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you want to fill in a little bit of information after I address this, then feel free. But I just wanted to mention, and it's already been in the paper, but at the Oceanside Services Committee that we have passed, RDN is directed now to proceed with preparations for a spring 2025 referendum on borrowing up to $30 million for an expansion to the Ravensong Aquatic Center. So that will be going to the board, and then we'll go from there. And the idea is, and the reason I voted for it at the Oceanside Services Committee, is that it allows the public to have their input at a relatively low cost per person. It's about $4 or $5 per person for the referendum. And however the public votes, should we get to the referendum, then we'll get to hear from them whether or not we go for that expansion on the Ravensong Aquatic Center. So, Mayor, I don't know if you wanted to expand on that a little bit, but I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah, the only clarification, because you're online here, is that the cost of $4 or $5 per person is the cost of the referendum.
Yes.
Yeah, not the cost of the expansion. Just
No.
wanted to make that clear. Okay,
No.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Wood, do you have something else on the UBCM?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Mayor, that at UBCM during the resolutions plenary, I spoke to the funding of RCMP services for small municipalities. It's almost a constant that there are resolutions that speak to a better tiering system. And I know Councillor Gore has been championing this as well. As Parksville gets closer to 15,000, we're going to see a jump in our policing services. And so I just wanted to mention that I spoke to this resolution in the plenary sessions and that it passed. And so UBCM is raising the issue with the province. And I was also speaking to ministerial staff, and they know that it is a significant issue for municipalities. So from my understanding, it is on the province's radar, and it would be nice if we heard something back eventually from the province on that. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wood. Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, I'll go right ahead. I had advisory design panel here as well. However, the one that came forward has already come to council today, so that was really quick. I'd like to mention if something's come to the advisory design panel so that people do know that things are moving along. So that one's done. The Chamber of Commerce, since our last meeting, I've attended a Chamber of Commerce board meeting, and I've also had the opportunity to have separate meetings with the executive director. I did give the board a heads up that the grant and aid application was not recommended for approval by the grant committee, and that recommendation, but that they do come to the council for final approval. And similarly, as I was in the audience at the Oceanside Recreation Committee, I did let them know that their RDN grant request was not successful at that committee level. I spoke to the board about the importance of making applications to the city for large-scale events well in advance. And this would include events such as the Chamber Summer by the Sea Market. And I was able to discuss this further with the Chamber's executive director. I can carry on.
There you go.
All right.
You're on
thank
a
you.
roll.
Okay. The Oceanside Task Force for on Homelessness, Project Connect, the host event is taking place today from noon till 3 p.m. So it's on right now at the Parksville Community Center at 223 Mill Street. And this event aims to connect those experiencing homelessness in our community with local health and wellness services, with agencies and support resources. There is still no word on a cold weather shelter for this year. I will add that work is underway on the strategic plan for the task force. 2 meetings have been held and a follow-up is scheduled for early November. Okay. As far as the library goes, the library board, I have attended a meeting of the library board, and some of that links through to UBCM, where the library and library funding and services was certainly brought forward, and a resolution was unanimously approved to request an advisory board, an advisory committee for the government level regarding library services. Particularly, I think it's worth noting here that our library is funded 95% by municipal levies, and the provincial government portion has dropped over the last 10 years from 5% to 4%, and that libraries have not received, except a one-time lift, that funding for libraries has been frozen basically since 2009. So at the last meeting of Vancouver Island Regional Library, one main topic was on the budget. So that will be coming forward. And I have been reached out to our Director of Finance to share that information with her at this time. The Arts Council, I hope everybody notices the t-shirt. Thank you. There's some on the back too, but I would like to make a mention of the BC Culture Days, which took place. They're somewhat separate from the Arts Council, but the kickoff event was replete with music, dancers, and a variety of visual arts presented in a market format. Councillor Wood gave a most impressive reading of the King's Message, which was very well received. And Adam Lewis, Adam Lewis designed here, folks, is an up-and-coming artist from the Weewakai Nation out of Campbell River, and he worked with several young and not so young people to create 2 stunning panels. His work is highly regarded, and people who were familiar with his work, knowing that he was going to be here and working on this project, that came from as far away as Alert Bay, Gabriola, Nanaimo, and Vancouver to take part. I attended also just the other day, I attended the Exquisite Corpse event, which was a great hit, sold out, I believe. So that filled the Jensen Center. It was a great event. That's all I have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beal. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Parksville Downtown Business Association, I'm the liaison for, and they have a project. It's been in the news. Imagine Parksville Downtown. It's an ambitious project with Tammy Frankfurt as the president and team applying to the province of BC for the BC Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Grant, which starts tomorrow, which on October 8th. They're having a whole week of talking to the local people. The announcement for more details is in the Parksville Qualicum News and on their website. Teresa Cooper, who's the executive director, said this project is a chance for all community members to come together, share our ideas, and create a downtown that reflects the hopes and dreams of everyone in Parksville. So that was a large grant that they received for doing this project. And also the PDBA has their AGM on the 17th of October. We have a lot of sound effects going here.
Hungry mice.
Yeah, anyway, I guess it's not an earthquake. Anyway, the Parksville Historical Society. On September 12th was the last of the museum concert series for 2024 with Janelle Nadeau on harp and Ashton Lim on cello. Went well. It's been a terrific summer. The Chamber of Commerce had a business after business hosted at the museum on September 19th. And also to let you know that the council members and the mayor are always welcome for a private tour, personal tour to see the museum, just so you know that, because it's closing at the end of the month. On October 26th from 5 to 8 p.m. is the second annual community trick-or-treat event. Costume trick-or-treaters can go door to door to collect candy in the museum's old-fashioned village, with live music and other activities on site for kids of all ages. Bring your kids or grandkids for a fun evening. Last year, there was 500 people attended, so that was really something for the museum. The museum closes for reopening at the end of October, and then we reopening this spring. And then the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region, we met last Wednesday and attended a gathering which Maybury hosted of the BC Biospheres, Claycoat Sound and Howe Sound. The regional gathering was on last week for all 3 biospheres here in Parksville, where they had a full itinerary and were at the Bayside for their headquarters. So it's carrying on, and it was really interesting to meet the different, from the Clackfoot and the House Sound Biospheres and the people that are involved. So thank you very much. That's my reports.
Thanks, Councillor
Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah.
Sit. Anybody else, anything liaisons unreported? Okay. At this time, council, I'd like to move into special business. Do I move her and second for the recommendation that pursuant to section 91C, D, E, F, and K of the community charter, council proceed to a closed meeting to consider items relating to labor, the security of the property of the municipality, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, law enforcement and negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service. Moved by Councillor Grens, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? Thank you, council. We'll move into in camera at this point. At this time, I would